Oh,
There we go.
Don't worry, Horgan's waiting for the mail-in ballots before he announces his win. He knows there's a timeline out there in the multiverse where only liberal voters mailed in their votes.
I mean, it's going to be a pretty contentious result and probably going to cause riots.
Like British Columbian elections.
Yeah, it's like
Devolves into madness in the streets.
Wilkinson will not concede.
You start,
We shall have civil war.
yeah, starts an armed militia in the streets, burns down Vancouver. All right, we're live, guys.
Man, whoever's head of the Wexit Party BC, they won't concede either. They deserve those 2 seats.
Was checking some of the northern BC ridings, and our boy Rod Taylor got 750 votes. He didn't quite,
Christian Heritage Party.
didn't quite. Well, that was what I saw when the count was happening. So it's he probably actually got more by the final count, but he didn't quite squeak out the victory.
Something tells me Christian Heritage voters weren't too worried about COVID, so they probably didn't do as many mail-ins. Just intuition. Oh man, I got new headphones. It's so dreamy.
Which ones?
Sennheiser HD 450s.
450s? Are they wireless?
I got 590s.
Yeah, they're wireless noise canceling.
It's pretty good.
But obviously I plugged them in with the provided wire to my computer. Everything these days is wireless, and then you just use a wire anyway because you're a boomer.
This is very on topic, but the dream is the new thing is there's ones that have like the hyper low latency 2.4 gigahertz band wireless and Bluetooth in the same headset, and you can connect multiple devices to a base station. So you can have like your phone, computer, tablet, everything connected to the same base station, and then switch between devices like from your headset.
Oh man, I was actually just thinking about whether or not I could do something like that.
That's
dreamy.
The best one I know of that does that is a SteelSeries Pro.
Oh, okay. So more of like a gaming thing at the moment.
Yeah, it's $420 Canadian headset.
I was looking at headsets, but I really wanted noise canceling because I'm in the basement and people watch TV at incredibly loud volumes.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I don't think the SteelSeries is noise canceling, but it has.
No, I don't think they have the option. Noise canceling, like Sony's by far the best, and then obviously Bose is still good, but they've been sleeping on their lead for like 8 years.
The brand new Sony MX4 or whatever it is just like the peak right now.
Yeah, I was between that and the Sennheisers, but it's like a $300 difference almost. So
yeah, Sennheiser has a couple of good budget options. I think the 450 and the 440 are 4.4 whatever DTC. Those are the recommended ones for more budget.
This one on Amazon. So like I don't know how true this is, but it was $250 and now it's $145. So
yeah, and the slightly downgraded version of what you bought, which is probably the most recommended one because it's usually cheaper, is $110 on sale.
Yeah.
And then quite a good.
Yeah, the Sony were on for $410, and I was like, man.
The old version of those Sonys and the Sennheisers hit $250 for.
That would have been unreal. But yeah, if my headphones lasted me more than like 2 or 3 years, I would have definitely went with Sony's. But I just can't really justify it. And these actually turned out to be really good headphones.
For most people, you won't notice like that huge of a difference between like $150 and
that's the other thing. I got a sound card for my computer for $100 instead of so I have a sound card and these instead of just the headphones, because definitely these with a sound card will sound better than the Sonys on their own.
Man, just get a new motherboard at that rate.
Man, I'm actually pretty convinced that my motherboard, like the sound chip on it, is frying or however it does the sound, because the volume it pushes through the headphones on my old headphones has been just steadily decreasing for like the last year. Like I used to have my computer volume around like 40 to 50, and now it has to be around 100.
This is very fascinating, but I think we should get on topic.
That is on topic.
Unless you guys want to turn this into an audio file podcast.
Well, because
it would actually be so golden to have like a podcast where we just talk about things that people get really like autistically passionate about, and we just absolutely butcher it.
Yeah, and then we could drive views from hate mail, basically. Just pretend to be authoritative. Well, we can do that for this
problem
podcast.
Is that we're
I was gonna say I think we might do that anyways. All right, so we should get back on topic, and that is the BC election that just occurred yesterday, and the results are somewhat in, and it's an NDP majority.
No, dude, that I will not accept it.
All right,
I will not concede. We need to wait until at least, I would say, potentially next November for the mail-in ballots to be completed.
Well, you never know with Canada Post. So let's just wind up being next November.
Not my government.
Yeah, not my premier.
Not my premier. So
yeah. Horgan is a fascist.
Realistically, though, it seems like it'll be a super majority for the NDP.
Yeah, it was 55 seats for the NDP.
Seats.
55 right now.
Oh,
for the NDP, it got updated, and then you need 44 for the majority. So there's almost no chance that it will change. Essentially, what happened is the Liberals got smashed. They used to have 41 seats, now they're down to 29. That might move plus minus 1 or 2, and then the Greens supposedly gained 1 seat at dissolution, but
I thought they at 4 now.
No, it's saying 3 right now.
I thought they had 3 last election too.
That's what I thought too, but I think there's this Vancouver Sun is being
seats?
The Vancouver Sun is being weird. I don't know. They say that like at dissolution, it was 41, 41, and 2, and then today it's 55, 29, and 3.
Oh, I think one of the Green members left the party and joined the Liberals. Because the Liberals had 1 less seat, or not Liberals, NDP. The NDP had 1 less seat than the Liberals at the results of the last election.
That actually is true. That's actually true. Because it was 40, 41, and 3, and I'm pretty sure Price is right, and it went from 3 to 2 and 40 to 41. That makes total sense.
Yeah, and BC politics, if for whatever reason, it's not uncommon to, they call it walk across the aisle and literally just say, well, I was elected as an MP for the Green Party, but I'm going to now join the NDP.
Well, they want to be the side of the winners. They don't want to get fucking slaughtered after election, sacrificed in the purge. Does anyone have was anyone surprised or
no?
I was surprised at how much of a majority it is. I was figuring they'd flip 1 or 2 seats. Well, they flipped one of the seats that the Liberals have held since the 70s.
Man, I was not surprised. I was actually mildly surprised that it wasn't more lopsided, but
blowout.
I mean,
was this what the polls were predicting then?
I think so.
I didn't even look at the polls, man. I just knew that Horgan was having his dick sucked essentially basically because BC was doing well with COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why he called the election. He didn't want to, he had such massive momentum from...
essentially because our province didn't melt down, so therefore he looks pretty good.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And you can see it with all the messaging, right? All the NDP messaging has Horgan's name on it. More than any other Canadian, political campaigns I've seen before. It really has Horgan and Horgan's NDP, Horgan, because Horgan was the one giving the television appearances with what's her name, the health lady, every other day for COVID.
Yeah, the Minister of Health.
And he got so much good press from that, it's just insane. I think it was so that I don't know. My sense going into it was going to be just a crushing NDP victory. And
I guess what I didn't realize was how many close seats there were in British Columbia, because last election the NDP got 40% of the vote, and this election they got 45% of the vote, and that was enough to gain them 14 more seats.
But that's a pretty big shift in popular vote, 5%. Like that's
and the Liberals went down 5%. Like it was a direct switch, basically.
That's exactly what it was. Like the Greens didn't really lose anything.
10% margin increase, right? Like that's huge. Like especially in a first past the post system, that's just like crazy big shift.
Yeah, but I mean, they're now sitting at 55 seats to 32 for the collective opposition.
Yeah, that's pretty much in line with what I expected. But
same with me. I didn't think it was going to be quite this big of a lead, but I definitely a majority.
But I'll just say, like, intuitively, like when one party gets 45% of the vote, I didn't expect them to end up with 55 out of 87 seats. But like, I mean, like they flipped one of the places that the Liberals have had.
Man, I'm glad you guys have these thoughts.
Flips.
I thought this would be like totally. Everyone would just be because like even like I mean the federally, the Liberals got a fairly like strong majority with like what was it like 34% of the popular vote.
Yeah.
Like in first past the post, you really don't need
majority,
much.
or you mean minority? Like this minority government? Or?
No, when they won their majority, didn't they have under 40% of the popular vote when they won their?
I think you're thinking of this recent one because they're currently governing with the least percentage of popular vote ever.
Let's see, because hopefully I'm not talking out of my complete. Oh yeah, okay. I was a little off. They got 39.47% of the popular vote in 2015. So that was their large majority government that they got.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have 40% of the popular vote. I mean, provincially is obviously different because it's Conservative, NDP, Liberal rather than, and the Greens always capture like a small percent. But
yeah, it's much more of a two-party system here.
Well, BC is like three-party, technically.
It's three-party, but the Greens... Well, that's something that we can discuss. Yeah, that's something we can discuss right now is, like, essentially, normally the Greens aren't much of a factor, but given this past government, like the one that was formed when Horgan first won, when was that, 2014? Something like that?
Well, it depends how you're talking about them being a factor.
Well, like normally they only win like one or two seats, but last time they were able to win enough seats, and it was such a close draw between the Liberals and the NDP that they actually were like the wedge. So the NDP actually had to structure government with them. So then they actually had a power position. But normally they don't really get anything done, right? Because like if you have two seats and then a party has majority or even minority, but not enough to form government, you can just ignore them. But that didn't happen last time, so it created a really weird situation.
Their biggest effect is the fact they get last election 16.5% of the vote, in this election 15% of the vote. They get a ton of votes for them, even though they only get 2 or 3 seats.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but even. Like
they're a big influence, like just on a fundamental, a lot of people vote for them rather than alternatives, which could shift things. So you have to assume that the NDP took a couple Green voters on this election and would generally get most of the support that the Greens have. But like imagine 15% of the vote being split up, or even 10% of that even 10% of it when that was all that shifted this time was 10%. It was this big of a shift.
Well, that's why like I wasn't really surprised, like because 45% is basic. Like say you kind of average out the Green vote across the province, probably grabs about 10% in an average riding, 10 to 15% in an average riding. Some more, some less, obviously, right? You're only actually fighting over that remaining 85% of the vote. Yeah,
that's true. Like I wasn't really picturing it like that as much. So
it's
when you put it like that, the 45% a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, you're well. I guess obviously with 15%, your average riding gets 15%, so you're fighting over 85% of the remaining vote. And obviously, the Green Party only won 3, so for almost all ridings, NDP and Liberal are battling it out for the 85% of the vote. And so if you get 45 of the 85, that's just pretty goddamn crushing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's a complete blowout.
Well, as far as Canadian politics go, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, and hopefully this won't ignite any. Like, I swear to God, if we have another referendum about first past the post, first proportional, I'm gonna claw my hair out. Like, I think that's settled for longer because that was one of the big NDP things was going to proportional representation, and they had when was that? We had the referendum not that long ago, like a year ago or something, a year and a bit ago.
That was are you talking about are you talking about the national one?
No, the provincial one.
We had a provincial referendum on voting on how the vote would be, whether it be
that was in 2018 December.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
December
that's right.
2018. That makes sense. So, and it was fairly decisive that it was no. It was a fairly decisive no, not to change it, right? So hopefully they don't bring it up again during this stint, as the NDP doesn't bring it up again as during their stint as in power. Because I just
from the commentary I read, it seemed like that was considered a bonus for one of the reasons the NDP got more voters is because they stopped talking about. Like, they obviously haven't brought it up because the referendum failed. And people really didn't want the voting system to change.
I feel like it's one of those situations where it's like the vocal minority that want it to change because they're like the ones
that are Greens, right? It's the people who are voting for the small parties. Like
well, that's it. It's the 15% that vote Green that really want it.
Yeah.
And everyone else is just like, shut the fuck up. Vote for something electable.
Yeah, vote for something that's not completely delusional. So you guys want to get into the platforms or something like that?
I was just going to say, before we get off this, like BC actually has a history of changing its voting system. In 1991 was the first time they actually did first past the post. And then before that, they had a different system. So, like, BC's kind of weird.
Yeah, BC's always been weird, though, in terms of Canadian politics, because we don't even have a Conservative Party.
Yeah, because of it initially, we didn't have a party-based system until the early 1900s. So, like, I imagine it all goes back to BC being its own dominion before joining Canada.
God, I wonder how Newfoundland works.
Yeah, don't even want to know.
Or doesn't.
Well, so long as it's not Quebec, it'll probably
Can
operate.
You get EI for your electoral system? It's not working.
Apparently. Platform-wise, do you guys have any, like, initial thoughts about, like, implications, or just, like, are you happy with the results, given the...
My understanding is that the NDP were basically promising to stay the course. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They're going to spend their faces off. That's kind of what the plan
I saw a ton of Liberal ads because I imagine I fit into their demographic that they paid Google to target. And it would be like, we're going to get rid of tent cities. I saw that like 1,000 times. And I'm like, man, this is a hell of a policy position. And the other big one was they were going to hold PST for a year.
Yeah.
Which they didn't have any like explicit plans on how that was going to work. But they're going to do it.
They're going to get rid of it for a year. That's what they said.
Yeah,
they didn't explain whether or not they do the regular accounting and refund you, or like if you'd have to do extra accounting to get rid of the PST.
And I bet
not do it this year and then do it again next year. Like fire the people who do your PST accounting and then hire them again next year.
There was I'm seeing here that it was projected to cost $7 billion, $6.9 billion for that, and my guess is like that's just with them, like, you know, the lost income from PST.
Yeah.
And then the overruns would be another $6.9 billion in trying to figure out the accounting.
At least.
Yeah.
Like, you just know, like, it's just ludicrous. What a ludicrous plan. What an actually ludicrous plan that is.
It was such a Hail Mary. It was just...
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they would even actually have implemented it once they would, if they got into power. It's just, to me, it struck me as a plan that you have to understand is probably a horrible idea. Like, you just...
Oh, then the
like
third...
But why even propose that? Like,
it's a voting wedge, right?
I know, but like, why the PST? The NDP proposal of just giving everyone $1,000 is so much more sensical.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, it's absolutely out of touch. Like, the Liberal Party, like, the biggest problem is just being out of touch with like what people actually want. Like,
one of the things I find really
Liberal
funny,
Party in BC wants to be really pro-business, and like PST is like the pro-business way to give people money.
Yeah, exactly.
Because your businesses are all paying accountants to do all their PST and stuff, so they're going to save even more than your average person.
They really... That's one of the things that struck me wandering around Vancouver. It's like they really were appealing to a smaller chunk of the populace, and it was like the only place I ever spotted Liberal signs, big homes in Vancouver. In some of the neighborhoods, I live in a really wealthy area, not in a nice place, but I live in a wealthy area of Van, and all of the homes have the Liberal signs up. And then the second you go into any of the the apartment areas, like the much more working class areas, NDP everywhere. I just thought that was so funny.
Marple areas both went both Liberal, obviously.
What's that?
The two super rich areas in Vancouver. Well, two of the super rich ones, the Cambie area, and Marple, or Southwest Marine, both went Liberal. Like, not surprisingly, it's like everyone that lives there is fucking
super loaded.
It felt like the BC Liberal Party was just somehow trying to campaign for Alberta, basically. If they ran that campaign in Alberta, it would have just been great.
Not even, because it's like half their crap is just like carbon copy of NDP. It's just strange. It's Vancouver Langara, and it was Vancouver how the... Okay, I gotta figure out.
Coquitlam?
Quilchena. And then it was Richmond North Center that went Liberal. Vancouver Fairview didn't even go, which is funny.
Where?
Well, like some of the really rich areas are Vancouver Point Grey, and then Vancouver Fairview. Those are really rich areas. Yeah. But those ones also have...
It's also super hippie because it's student and also professors and stuff. And also David Envy runs in Point Grey. So...
Not surprisingly, West Vancouver Sea to Sky went fucking
really
Green Party.
But, okay, and another thing that I noticed about all the campaigns that was just like, I don't know, like, maybe I'm just like an idiot, but like the senior living care facility stuff is just like, oh yeah, that exists, and we're gonna spend like $100 billion on it over the next 1 year.
Liberals is $1 billion over 5 years, and the NDP was somewhere around the same.
And it's like I don't know, it just seems like such a reactionary promise, but I mean, I guess that's very political. Nobody mentions that in any previous election. Nobody gives a shit about any of it, and then COVID hits the long-term care facilities,
wipes out a shitload of them.
Is like a massive it's just it's just like, I just don't think it's like based on anything reasonable. Like, it's just
one interesting thing with that is that BC, from an objective standpoint, had like the best outcomes for our long-term care facilities and in the COVID times.
And I just don't even think it's like I'm not connected at all to like long-term care facilities, but as far as I know, like before this, it was like nobody wants to spend money on them because it's just like it's just not a priority for people. You know what I mean?
But to varying degrees, like BC spends a lot of money on our long-term care facilities compared to, say, Ontario and Quebec, where they had the worst outcomes. So like Ontario and Quebec, like one of the big drivers of their bad outcomes is that they have a system that allows workers that work under 10 hours a week to get paid really poorly and get no benefits. So they have a lot of long-term care workers that work at multiple care homes, working one shift at each care home. So they would get COVID, and then they'd go spread it to 5 or 6 other care homes.
Okay, my question, because that also happened in BC to a lesser extent, I believe, because I know there was cases linked to multiple.
Well, we have that in BC, but it's with fully licensed or registered nurses, so that they might work at multiple places to get their hours in, but they aren't, like, the system isn't set up to encourage people. Like, you can live working minimum hours at a care home in BC, whereas you can't really in those places.
Is there such an oversupply of people willing to work at those facilities that they can pay so poorly, or why is it
in BC there's not really an oversupply because we have more requirements, but there's a lot of immigration that then goes into working in long-term care, and that's even worse when you have limited requirements like Ontario and Quebec. So you get a lot of people immigrating specifically for the purpose of working in long-term care facilities.
Yeah, so it would be kind of like
specifically with the plan of working in long-term care facilities.
So it's kind of like the seasonal workers or something like that, where they bring them in to do farm work, and it's pretty rough conditions and it's low pay, and they get away with
live in Canada forever, because unlike seasonal workers.
Yeah, so it's like one of those systems where it's pretty much seems to be taking advantage of migrants.
Because our system, especially in BC, relies on a lot of Filipino nurses.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
and they have to take an equivalency test, I believe, which is they're well prepared for, coming from the Philippines.
Yeah,
and then they get in and they do a lot of work.
Well, I guess people just don't really, at least or how I feel about all this government spending. People don't understand money is just it's basically, it doesn't have people treat it like it's magic. It's there's a limited amount of productive resources that a society has, and you can't allocate it everywhere. Society can only produce so much. So if you spend your productive efforts on, say, long-term care facilities, that by nature, by necessity, means that you have to cut efforts in other areas to reallocate to the long-term care facilities, for example. So people just think if you just put 10 billion here, then all the problems will be fixed. It's no, there's
because there's actual effort. There's the actual economic. I guess you would call them the real resources, not just the cash, because you could just add money to a bank account and make it. You can print money all day, like Jerome Powell does, but there's actual finite resources that are the things that are supposed to back up the money.
Labor and material resources, and
it's like the fucking vaccine, right? It's there's only so much money that you can dump into it.
Exactly. So you have to, if you take, if you just propose billions everywhere, it's not like just
all you're going to do is cause inflation.
Billions to be sent all around the fucking province doesn't actually do anything. There is a limited amount of productive resources, and if you put billions here and billions there, all you're doing is just putting yourself in a deficit, and you're not actually reallocating. You're not going to actually really do much to move the needle in terms of increasing productive efforts.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's you can throw all the money at the people to do the job, but there's only so many people to do the job, and you're going to pull them away from somewhere, and you're not going to be able to just make them magically appear like you can money. If you really want to do it that way, you can just print the money. But it just one of the big things that I got out of the platforms was, we're just going to spend billions of dollars and throw money at this like crazy, and we're not going to think about anything other than we're not going to think about any sort of fiscal responsibility. We're just going to toss money around, and all of the parties, regardless of their platforms, that was kind of the general idea.
Well, there is ways to get more, quote unquote, more productive capacity, and one of those ways is having foreign investment come in, or foreign
you bring in
development and economic development, because that does bring in
Well, it brings in resources from other places.
Exactly. So, and it's like, I don't know, it just seems like Canada as a whole, and people the worldwide have forgotten, like, there is like actual physical limits to what can be done. Like, people just, I don't know, like these election promises and these like, oh, just, why don't we just, cap rent and increase minimum wage and, propose $5 billion for every single program we think is useful, and it'll just all magically get done and fixed, and all the problems will be fixed. It's like, like, if that was true, you think,
we'd already live in a utopia.
People would have figured out to do that before. Like, you can't just magically keep printing money and proposing, budget deficits indefinitely, and all the problems will be fixed, and then you just default on your loans and it all poof into smoke and you're done. Like, it just seems like we're running on like some 10-year economic boom, like, delusions. Like, people forgot that there can be recessions. People forgot that the economy can have an actual meaningful downturn and, like, job losses. And, like,
that's the thing. It's like, to me, there will come. Who was I listening to? It was it might have been Glenn Lowry, but it was some economist. He was saying, like, a lot of people think, modern monetary theory is completely different. Economy's working entirely different nowadays. And his point was essentially, why would you assume that? Like, why would you assume that it's going to, magically work different and you can just spend your face off and just completely rack up enormous amounts of debt because things work differently now? It's like, history has taught us that, these things, like the fundamental rules of like various, I guess, like the various disciplines, they usually apply. And his point was, there's no real reason or like a lot of evidence to suggest that we're not going to, like the foundational principles of economics that were laid hundreds of years ago in, like, the Wealth of Nations, that those are just going, those have changed fundamentally and permanently. His point was, thinking like that is probably going to get us absolutely murdered with all of this debt. It's like, he's like, there will become a recession, like there always is. We're not, like, he's like, I do not think it's likely that we've passed the point of being able to have those. And he's like, when you spend this money like this, like, watch out, because the economic consequences of it could be completely catastrophic. And it's like, well, I guess we're going to find out, right? But he's a really, I don't, it might not have been Glenn Lowry, but it was some very respected economist. But,
well, and you could even make the argument, like, oh, that the actual money itself does work differently in modern monetary theory or whatever, but that doesn't mean, like, productive work works differently. Like,
no, of course not.
Like, people need to solve problems and get things done. You still need someone to actually do the work. Like, you can't just, like, propose in a budget and then allocate $5 billion and then it goes into the black box and then out pops
and the solution
project and the solved problem. It's like some smart person and group, some group of smart people with training and education in that discipline need to tackle the problem. And if they're doing that, they can't do other stuff. They can't work on the other problems that they were working on before. So figure it the fuck out. Like, there's a limited amount of human capital and problem solving and productive resources available. Pick your poison. You're going to have to decide. Like, I guess that's what it seems like. It's like people seem like completely unaware that they have to actually make sacrifices, and there's opportunity costs, and they can't have it all. And, like, it's just because we haven't had, like, a recession or an economic event that has, like, highlighted that for a decade. I think people are living in literally la land, where they just think, like,
you can print the money and it's all good.
Just, the federal government can pay out, CERB forever, and the provincial government can hand out $1,000 to every citizen, and it all works. And the government can pay for rents, and they can buy
cap rents,
low
all
income
sorts of
housing, blah blah blah. Like, it's just all infinite, and it's like, I don't know. It's like something's gonna break at some point, and people are gonna have to snap back into reality.
That was this economist's point. He's like it's much more likely that we have not moved past into like a whole new realm entirely. He's like that's extremely unlikely, and eventually it will catch up with us, and when it does, it's going to be extremely painful. And it's like, well, this, people need to understand that, and they should understand that sooner rather than later, so they can, like, he wasn't saying like shut all the spending down, but it was kind of like a call to reason and moderation. But
yeah, and I think that applies to governments and corporations, but I guess all the elections just like highlight, because we've had a lot of elections recently in Canada, and actually I guess the US has elections all the time.
Yeah, they're never not having elections.
Yeah, it's every fucking, and their election cycles are just cancerously long because of the rules about when they're allowed to campaign are different than Canada. Canada's like a 6-week campaign season, like by law.
Yeah, man, the United States absolutely needs to bring in a bunch of laws like surrounding their campaign finances and their campaign lengths, and it'll just take a huge amount of the showboating garbage out of it.
But yeah, this provincial election was just like, I don't know, looking at it, just like, man, everyone's fucking living in la land where money just grows on trees and you can do whatever.
Well, one of the things that like I think was quite damaging, and I think it applies to the it applies to the states and the federal government and every other branch of government. They just spent like crazy, and then I think a lot of people looked at that and they think, oh, we can, like, if there's a problem, we can just spend money and there is no problem with that. Okay, great. Let's just turn on the taps permanently, and I think it's going to be a very rude awakening in the next, I don't know, but like eventually we're going to get a pretty nasty recession. That's just how it goes. It's how it always has gone with modern economies.
BC is just also, as like in its nature, the like la land of money. Our largest industry by far is real estate rental and leasing.
Jesus Christ.
So what a 17.6% of our GDP comes from real estate, rental, and leasing. It's just,
yeah.
Well, then it's 9% construction, then 7.5% healthcare, then 6.7% manufacturing.
At some point, bad shit is going to happen, and people are going to have to like deal with the reality of that. But
like our government is like on like some level, like just very funded by all this whole housing boom in Vancouver, and just taking a cut off things left and right.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons it's never really gotten properly clamped down on, because the government would be completely broke if it didn't have that revenue stream. That's one of the reasons. Actually, the NDP last time around, their taxes did seem to cool off the market a bit, but now that interest rates are pretty much zero, I think it fired everything back up to an extreme degree. So it's probably the only thing keeping that damn thing going.
Well, I mean, at least the taxes generate some government revenue. Like,
yeah,
like at least they get some bang for their buck out of all the foreign investors, like for the long term. Because like the problem with like just selling out your real estate market to foreign investors, like it will eventually, you'd think, peak at a point, and you're not bringing in a corresponding tax base of employees, because it's just empty homes that are owned by foreign investors who don't live here and don't generate any income tax, or very much in the way of GST, PST, because they don't live here. So at least you get a long-term method of actually extracting some dollars out of those people.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people, I don't know quite why this was an issue up here, but in the boonies, people were a bit upset that the NDP brought in a further tax on homes worth more than $3 million.
Well, it's because
There's,
you
like,
are going to have some.
Probably,
Like,
honest to God, like one person in the north 50% of the province that applies to.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it's
Where,
2% on properties more than 3 million.
I think because in the boonies, it's like any sort of tax is seen as.
Well, it's because they're all going to have
Yeah,
a property
right.
worth 3 million. Just you wait.
Well, if you had a huge farm, it might be worth 3 million.
Yeah,
and then how would you ever be able to pay 2% tax on that? Where are you going to get the money from your huge farm?
Every northern oil patch worker is going to have a $3 million farm at some point. It's just you wait.
Yeah,
It's just a bunch of temporary embarrassed land barons.
Their $300 in Canada stock investment is going to go up 600,000%.
It's not in Canada anymore. That's gone. What is it called? Ovidium or some bullshit? Ovintiv, yeah. I made a ton of money on those guys.
It's going to be worth billions. So, and then they'll be purchasing $3 million properties left, right, and center, and it's just fucking bullshit that there's tax there.
Well, and even worse, like, what are they going to have to pay for tax on their $3 million nuclear power plant, small modular nuclear power plant that they install on their property?
Oh, yeah. The delusions of the northern BC are... I don't... Like, was there any, like, policies or anything that you guys were, like... Or...
In favor of? Yeah,
I don't think anything I was in favor of. But before that,
zero from all three parties in favor. Well, that's a resounding endorsement of the election.
Before that, though, the funniest thing I saw in the Liberal campaign ads were that they were trying to attack the NDP for how they dealt with COVID. And it's like the NDP was also campaigning on how they dealt with COVID. And I was like, that's a bold strategy there.
Yeah, it did not turn out well. Now, did that? For me, I saw.
I think it's comparative versus absolute.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Liberals are banking on like the absolute performance, and the NDP are banking on the relative performance.
Look at the states and look at like Quebec, right?
Yeah, exactly. And since every single Canadian apparently thinks they're fucking American, then actually the NDP strategy was way bigger brain because
people in general work on relative comparisons. So since we're all watching American news, we're like, oh, that's not us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you could definitely. Well, the testing here in BC has just been absolute dog shit.
Well, it's not that bad.
It's pretty. It's
dog shit's a bit strong. Like, we were the first province to have testing.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like we still never got up. Like, you had to have symptoms to be able to go get tested. You couldn't get tested for, like, if you thought you were in contact.
You can get tested fairly easily here.
Depends on which health authority you were under.
Yeah,
the Northern Health was easier.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more difficult to get tested here.
If you have symptoms, is pretty much you can.
Yeah, but if you thought you might have been in contact, like, you couldn't, which was
that's like common sense though. If you don't have symptoms, like, and there's limited capacity, why would you?
Yeah, but I just think it should have been.
Kessel was pointing out is that Ontario and Alberta were basically trying to shove people without symptoms through the doors to get tested at any possible moment.
Testing.
Ontario's testing capacity never got that much higher than BC's, and they had way worse cases. Like,
well, they passed the amount. Like, they had more testing capacity than people were even willing to use. Like, Doug Ford had to go out and ask people to go get tested because they weren't getting enough tests per day.
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, BC also was in a similar situation where our testing capacity was, like, adequate for the case count that we had.
Yeah, we just never had. We never had a government government that wanted to, or a health authority that wanted to test asymptomatic people.
Which
Alberta set up a dual stream, which was if you had symptoms, you got tested at like the hospital or whatever. But if you had no symptoms, you could just go to a pharmacy and get tested.
Because as far as I know, the tests were never even that accurate for people that were asymptomatic.
BC never released information on like the accuracy of its tests, and they were very like shy about accepting the accuracy of their tests, so I think they weren't very accurate.
Yeah, so
Because it was in Northern Health at one point, it was even if you tested negative, you still took 10 days off just in case. Although that would obviously be relaxed if there was a severe outbreak and they had issues with manpower. But they had enough manpower that they just did the double safety.
Yeah, see, that makes way more sense to me. It's like the test is probably not that great, and then you're like, just to be safe, you should be self-isolating anyway. Like, it's just, I don't know. It just seemed like one of those things where, like, people didn't really understand, like, how would you call it? Like, the logistics. It's like people just saw, look, not enough tests, government bad, when it was, in reality, it was like, no. Like, I'm just looking at, like, the recent testing numbers, and they test like several thousand, like 5,000 to 10,000 people a day, which
is a ton for a province with BC's population.
Like, we get and this is during a period where they're getting a few hundred people confirmed a day, so that seems like between like 1% and 4% are positive. That seems like a fairly reasonable positive rate, but I don't know.
I just think the primary issue with that, like, a lot of people just feel frustrated when they're told to isolate because they've come into contact with a suspected case, when they'd rather get a test and then be told they can just go about their daily lives. Literally
part of the problem, because you shouldn't. It's just, again, like, that seems like just a selfishness, and, like, again, coming back to, like, the BC election, like, I think, like, the crushing victory was on Horgan's quote unquote, like, BC's performance during COVID, which I really don't attribute to Horgan at all.
I don't attribute it to really too much that the province did. I think the province got pretty damn lucky in the sense that we didn't have a heavy duty community spread early on. Like, it was pretty minimal. Like, there was definitely quite a few things that were done well. I do think actually Bonnie Henry did a couple things that were, like, a lot better than other places. But for the most part, I think it was just a lot of luck, and then also just the general population, like the major population center of Vancouver already has, like, a pretty favorable view towards masks, and I think the mask usage got adopted really early, and I think that really helped slow, despite even the government saying, like, no, you know, these things aren't really that useful. I think they had already been adopted pretty widely, not like 50 to 75% right off the bat or something like that, but early on to the pandemic, when, you know, Fauci and Tam and others were saying, oh, masks don't work, there was already quite a bit of mask use in Vancouver. You know, I went down to Richmond, like, early on, and, you know, everybody was friggin' wearing masks down there. So I think a lot of the spread was slowed by other things other than the government.
Well, and it's also borne out that the majority of the infections occur from people that are symptomatic infecting people, even though asymptomatic transmission is possible. And there's definitely a culture in East Asia and Vancouver, obviously, you look at Japan, and it clearly helps a lot, because Japan is, like, they didn't do anything crazy against COVID, and they just never had a huge breakout.
Yeah, I think that's true. So, like, I do think it's kind of funny that Horgan ran on his response to COVID, which I wouldn't really attribute particularly to him at all. Like, I do think Henry was quite good, and so that
she had some things that were pretty sensible that I think a lot of other places, their leadership didn't do. Like, she was telling people to get outside.
She wasn't, like, much ahead of the curve compared to, like, any other jurisdiction in BC or in Canada, though. Like,
no, not by much, but, like, she had a few things that I think were pretty good that other. But again, I think it's just like the
half of it. I think was our frickin' spring break timing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that sounds like dumb luck. That's actually like something that probably was like a big contributor to how well we did with COVID. And it's like, yeah,
that stopped the community spread in the beginning, right? So we
essentially
didn't get hammered in the beginning.
And then anyway, it's funny that he calls it election off of that goodwill that would endanger growing cases in BC. Like, it's just, I don't know. I find it pretty fucking ironic that.
Well, if we have if we do have a really bad go of it, then he's gonna get blamed. So it'll be interesting.
Like, I really don't think the election was like that big of a risk, honestly.
No, because it was mostly done. Like, I think a huge chunk of it has been mail-in, right? So
even if you didn't mail in, I voted like 2 weeks early. Like, you could vote at any point in time. Like, there was nobody else voting because it's like you're there so early.
I voted day of, and I was the only person in that was there. Oh, the only voter that was there. There was like 10 Election Canada or Election BC like volunteers, but I was literally the only voter. So it was like I didn't go.
Yeah, no, it's just packed. Yeah, I do think it's a lot of dumb luck.
Well, there were 525,000 mail-in votes.
That's like got to be like a third at least of the fucking votes.
Well, yeah, that's about almost half. Like, in this election, it sounds like there were 1.2 million already that have been counted. So yeah, that's almost half of the votes.
Yeah, and then there was like, I think every riding had early voting at like different locations from like for like 2 weeks. Like, as far as I know.
Yeah. I find
that's how they set it up provincially, I believe.
It's so funny that I think like the BC government did a pretty good job, or the BC elections did a pretty good job of handling it. I find it so funny that the States is in catastrophe mode over mail-in voting.
States don't have the resources to figure out.
Well, but I mean, we'll see. Like, the problem with mail-in is you get like between 1% and 5% of mail-in ballots don't work, like, for whatever reason. So we'll see in BC what that percentage actually comes out to. But that's the big problem, because like 1% of the vote not being counted is a big issue.
It's really not, though.
Like, if you can't follow the friggin' instructions,
unless the percentage that is not counted is statistically significantly different from the regular vote.
Yeah, and I don't.
I mean, like, in the States, like, I'm talking from the American perspective, where you have Trump actively encouraging people not to vote by mail, and then obviously Biden and Democrats encouraging people to vote by mail. I think there will be a statistically different percentage.
Yeah, that could be wrong, but like, in theory, it's only a problem if there's like a statistical skew in terms of the ballots that are thrown out. Right?
BC, I wouldn't think there'd be a very big difference.
But even then, like, I guess it could bias it a little bit depending on the situation. I really don't think it. That's honestly why I hope the American election is just an actual fucking stomp.
Yeah, exactly. It'll stop it from, like, if it's a huge stomp one way or the other, it'll stop it from being as contentious.
I don't think it's possible for it to be a Trump stomp, like, in favor.
Man, if it's a Trump stomp, we're in for some problems.
His polling is just like, people say don't trust the polls, but like, it just seems like he pretty much doesn't have a chance of winning the popular vote, which means it won't be a stomp, right?
Exactly. Like, you can not trust the polls and think he still has a chance, but like, to think he could stomp is, I'd say, delusional at this point.
Yeah, it's like statistically so unlikely that he would actually crush it, but I don't know.
Anyways, back to the BC election. Do we want to kind of talk about their platforms a bit? I think we were on that subject and then we moved off.
Yeah, sorry, I distracted us by having nothing of interest.
Yeah, Price, I asked, and Price answered by saying he doesn't like anything out of all three parties, all of their platform points, whatever. That
all garbage.
It's probably about 600 to 800 election promises. Not a single one was favorable in Price's mind. So glad we determined that.
Okay, we didn't talk about Wexit, though.
There we go. The Wexit party's got all the good ones.
Or the Communist Party. I'm sure you could probably pick a thing or two out of there. Or the CHP.
Yeah.
For me, I did like, for the BC Liberals, I did like their proposal of a tax commission a fair tax commission to review every single tax in the province. I think that's smart. Like, I don't know, our tax system is insanely complicated federally and provincially, and just like it's such a fucking mess of taxes, and like it's so bad. Like, so having that is just, I think, smart. Like,
So, like, what would that change?
Well, it would
so
just
they
be a
were going
review.
to have they were going to have a commission and bring in a bunch of third-party independent tax professionals to thoroughly investigate every single tax in the province and recommend and make recommendations on improving basically the taxes in BC, the tax system in BC. So I don't know. I just think that's good. Like, we have such a patchwork of different taxes, and I just think it's past time when I think that should be done federally and provincially, honestly. So I like that. I did also like NDP and Liberals talking a lot about infrastructure investment. I think, like, if you're just going to be wasting, quote unquote, wasting money or spending a whole bunch of money racking up the debts, big infrastructure tickets is probably money well spent, like hospitals, schools. The NDP talked a lot about public transportation, including supporting expansion of the SkyTrain out to Langley. I think all that stuff's good because you're eventually going to have to spend that money, like, sometime. And
Might as well spend it with low interest.
you might as well spend it in a time where there's, some...
And there's job loss, right? So you could suck some of the people who got their, businesses or jobs destroyed, and you can pull them into pretty high-paying construction and related work. I think it's
so
solid
I think
idea.
Those are high return on investment, like, idea, like money spent. And then the one weird, like, small one that I don't know if many people picked up on is NDP was actually proposed decriminalizing, working with the federal government to decriminalize small amounts of
like all drugs.
All drugs, basically.
Yeah. I didn't see that one,
like
but I thought that is one that had been kicked around before, and I actually think that's a pretty solid idea.
Hasn't Horgan been in talks with Trudeau about that before this election?
Yeah, I think so. That's I remember something. I didn't look too much into it, but I remember something about that.
Because I had heard of that, but not in regards to the election, I think.
Yeah. That I don't remember exactly where, but they had. I'm pretty sure Horgan has spoken about that before. What I liked was there was some good stuff from the NDP about like climate change and like business and climate change, so green energy, that type of thing. So net zero emissions by 2050. It's like I think that's a good goal to set and at least try. How much they fuck up the economy doing it, we'll have to see. But at least they're trying to put some like pretty ambitious goals. Like a big part of that is like retrofitting to make buildings more green and just require greener buildings in general. I think those are all pretty good things. It's like if you're gonna have to do something around climate change, which you should be doing, these are some pretty good things. They're also pushing electric cars and e-bikes. They're gonna knock off PST on e-bikes to just encourage people to commute around like the Lower Mainland in
e-bikes.
Yeah, and I think you know what, might as well. Like if you
I think e-bikes are so much safer than scooters. Like it's just that's the way to go for sure.
Well, you just get the e-bikes on the bike lanes, and you're not going to be moving much faster or slower than an actual bike, and you're not going to get obliterated by a car. So, well, you're less likely. But a scooter, right? Like compared to,
and then you're like, they're going to get obliterated because they're just so brain dead.
Ride them on the fucking sidewalk.
I actually can't stand bicyclists.
Once you start driving in the city, it makes you want to tear out all of
pedestrians. Absolutely fine, not a problem with pedestrians. Other cars, I don't know. BC drivers have a reputation. I think everyone says that about their like locale. Like,
yeah, everybody sucks at driving.
it's like the weather thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, the weather in such and such changes in an instant. Every single person in every single fucker in Sahara Desert. Yeah, it's Sahara Desert. The weather just changes in an instant.
If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes.
It's 39 degrees and dry as shit. And the next second, it's 32 degrees and dry as shit. Just like one of those like stupid things people say, but like I think actually the one thing that gets my goat is cyclists, because they act like pedestrians half the time and act like cars half the time, and they just switch back and forth randomly without like rhyme or reason, and there's that making them unpredictable, and that's like the worst thing when you're
it's really difficult to predict what they're gonna do, and that's how I think a lot of them get smoked.
Super predictable, so I'm totally fine. Like it's annoying waiting for a pedestrian, like some 85.
You just assume they're gonna wander in front of the car.
That's hobbling across the street, so you can't turn left. But it's like, man, that's fine. Like that's predictable. I can tell what's going on. Like cyclist is on the sidewalk and then veers out onto the road, and you're just like, oh my god, you're gonna get yourself killed. Like it's just. I don't know.
Or they're just in the middle of the road going like 15 kilometers an hour, taking up an entire spot and holding up traffic.
Makes me
and then they'll swerve like into like I've seen cyclists that are like in the middle of the road doing the 20-kilometer-an-hour thing, and you're like, okay, this is annoying.
The best is when they do it on Broadway or one of the huge arteries, and the one bicycle will cut down traffic flow by like 30% on the major road of Vancouver.
But then the light will be red for vehicles, but it'll be pedestrians will be allowed to go, and they'll just fucking scoot over the sidewalk. So if you're like trying to turn right, and a cyclist goes from a car to a pedestrian, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like it's just I don't know. So e-bikes, I mean, if you want to get ran over at higher speeds, that's fine by me.
You can look stylish while you get
e-bikes. The nice thing with e-bikes is you can actually achieve road speeds, I believe, which makes them like they should be able to function in the role that bicycles are meant to function, which is as a car alternative, not as a pedestrian alternative.
True.
Yeah, just annoying, like the super annoying version of pedestrians. I think we can move on to some other ones. There's a couple other ones from the Liberals had a couple good things. NDP had a couple good things. I think one of the things I like from the Liberals is that they actually wanted to like develop. They wanted to remove ability to blockade illegally, so you couldn't just shut down trains and shit like that. So they wanted to get tougher on that, which is, I think, absolutely crucial. That's, enforcement of the frickin' law. NDP doesn't say anything about that. That was one thing I liked out of the BC government.
I mean, that's good, but I mean, that's ultimately going to be a federal thing.
It's going to be RCMP, right? But at least it's the government
being. Well, but it's not even RCMP necessarily. It could also be CN themselves if they actually cared, or whoever owns the railways. But like, they're just going to add another law onto the existing law that says you can't blockade railways, and then it's still going to be up to the railway police or the RCMP to actually go out there and break the blockade. And it's still going to be a terrible PR move for either of them, and they're still not going to do it.
Yeah, but at least you're seeing some support from the government.
They're not going to do it unless Trudeau or whoever's the leader says, makes a campaign promise that we're going to crack down on this bullshit, and then gives the RCMP the go ahead to do it. Then they won't do it, right?
Man, you know what? It would be just straight out of like the communist nightmares. Would be the actual railway police, because I believe they have like 100 meters on either side of a railway. The railway police have jurisdiction. They just rolled in there and got rid of those protesters. Like, that'd be just, it'd be so perfect. They'd have total legal jurisdiction to do it, but it would look so bad that they would never do it.
Somebody's got to grow some stones and do it.
It'd be like
some stage.
Straight out of like the early robber barons.
Yeah, exactly.
From the 1910s playbook.
Cracking heads with billy clubs.
Like the Rockefeller Empire. Throwback. Yeah.
Laissez-faire capitalism at its finest.
Is there anything we want to like hone in on as like not good?
Okay, with the quote unquote
Price has all
on
of
the
it.
NDP's position on green energy, it's like remains from my perspective just completely disingenuous because they want net zero carbon emissions and they want electric vehicles, but they aren't interested in spending the money on the infrastructure to develop renewable energies in BC, to the point of actually removing protections for BC renewable energy private industries that the Liberals put in place to allow our private industries to build electric, and we had to buy renewable electricity from BC. So they're now going to allow us to buy renewable energy from outside of British Columbia. And they're also not, they don't appear to be interested in building infrastructure that would be required to begin switching people from gas to electric.
No, that's a part of the plan
vehicles.
for NDP. They're going to add a whole bunch of charging stations. That's a part of it.
Well, okay, maybe that is, but like it's not the charging stations that matter. It's the actual like huge power lines that are going to cut like 50-meter swaths through
That's
all
true.
the forests of British Columbia to
Doesn't
move
matter.
the power.
Doesn't matter
as much.
unpowered charging stations all over the fucking place.
It's just a bunch of dead stations.
Like what people don't realize is like the power consumption in British Columbia electrically is all renewable, but that's only about 1/4 of the power we consume in British Columbia. And then over half of our power consumption in British Columbia comes from fossil fuels, but it just isn't used to generate electricity. It's used to heat our homes and run our vehicles.
That's what I was going to say. I would say a huge percentage. I don't know the numbers, but I would say sizable chunk is natural gas home heating, right? Like that's got to be a big chunk. That's really hard to replace because it's a very very cost efficient method of home heating.
But like I don't see these parties and their platforms addressing like the underlying practicalities of these. Like they'll say they want to build new charging stations or like subsidize putting a charging station in your garage. Well, it's like if 50 people in your neighborhood put a charging station in your garage, you don't have the like grid capacity to deal with that.
Well, that was one of the things about the NDP I find hilarious. They were potentially going to scuttle Site C, which was just a big addition to the already existing hydro dam. And, we're going to get, it's like, where are you going to get the renewable electricity from? Like, this is one of the best sources of renewables that you can possibly get. It's already a current dam site. It's not like you're building a brand new dam and Horgan wanted to potentially scrap the whole damn thing. It's like, well,
we have the answer to that now. They're going to ship it in from from probably the United States, where the United States can destroy their pristine environment to generate renewable electricity, and we'll just buy it off them.
And we'll just run a massive deficit into infinity and beyond.
yeah,
We'll just go from, like, before, like 10 years ago, we were, like, pretty much a world leader in renewable energy in BC. Like, I mean, we are a world leader in hydropower. Like, all of our power has been hydropower forever, but now that we could rebrand it as renewable energy, then a lot of American states were like buying off of BC to get renewable energy.
Yeah.
And now they aren't because they make their own renewable energy. And then now we're going to be the ones buying renewable energy. It's just funny.
What a twist. So I think in terms of stuff that we don't like, I agree with Price. I see a ton of shit I don't like. I think the biggest...
Okay, I never said that there's a bunch I don't like.
I know.
The main reason there's not a lot of things, anything I noticeably liked, is because almost all of the campaign promises are focused on the Lower Mainland, because that's where the voting populace is.
Yeah, they really don't give a shit about Northern BC.
I'm not really interested in most of the campamppromises.
You're like a spurned lover. You're just
yeah.
They're no attention paid to you, so you'll pay no attention to them.
Exactly.
Just no, thank you. I don't need any of your promises.
Yeah, Hubbard, do you want to talk about some stuff you don't like?
Well, just to recap, I just don't like that they're giving out money for everything. Like, there's a limited amount of, and also like just a complete lack of seems like. I mean, this is common to a lot of politicians and politics. It's just like such a smorgasbord of here's 1,000 things that we promise, and none of it's prioritized or focused. because it's just like appealing to every single little like special interest group and a special class and special, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, you know, there's, you know, a pocket of voters that like really care about, say, you know, long-term care homes. So you just like fucking, you know, promise $1 billion there, and then you go, you know, there's a group that cares about like the SkyTrain getting put into Langley. That's like whatever, a couple of ridings that you can buy off. Like it's just like every party has like just a huge smorgasbord, and it's like no one's like, you know, here's the 3 things that are most important for BC's future, and here's how we're gonna like, you know, address them or whatever. And then like, you know, some smaller promises on the side. So I just really hate like the clear kind of like it's
pandering all across the board, right?
It's just total naked pandering. Like none of the parties even attempted to like come out with like a comprehensive like
like a workable plan, right? Like 'cause the way that I see it is there's no way you're going to be able to implement all these things. It's just impossible. You don't have the funds for it. You don't have the manpower for it. Like you were saying before, economically speaking, there's no way. You don't have the actual underlying resources to do this. So what's going to happen is you're literally going to have to throw a bunch of them by the wayside, and I think they know that, and so a whole bunch of these promises won't be met. It's just buying votes, and I think
exactly.
Great.
No matter what industry you're in or what like part of the economy or part of the like what you're concerned in, you can control F pretty much any of the PDFs that these parties release for especially the NDP and Liberals that are even like longer. You can control F the fucking document and find something appealing to you. Like if you're in tourism, if you have a small business, if you're, you know, you live in the whatever Surrey or what, like anything you can think of, you can fucking control F the document. There'll be something promising you money and, you know, attention.
Yeah,
it's just like
there's no chance. Like there's going to be most of them are not going to be met, right? Like most of them are just going to be, you know, you won't get anything.
The execution is just not going to be there, right? Like, they might, you know, half-ass limp through a fucking promise, but it's just not, the execution is not going to be there. I don't see any like talk of like, you know, like, and maybe this is just I'll never be satisfied with the way politicians appeal. But like, I would much rather see like a platform that says like, here's the priority problems that this province faces. Like, here's what are the, you know, 3 biggest problems that our province faces in you know, reaching a you know, that's preventing this province from thriving. Here's our plan for fixing those 3 problems. And then, you know, then go through your laundry list of all the fucking pandering. Like, at least have something like that borders on like
doable
a vision.
Yeah, like an actual.
Like I agree with you 100% there, but I think BC's like unique problem is that a vision is actually not only not pandering, but like actively disliked by the voting public.
Well, because it's such a fragmented
like, the big
little
things I can think of for like long-term investments in British Columbia. One is moving more raw resources from inland Canada to ports, so expanding existing railways and pipelines. Like that's not going to be popular. And the other one is like further investment in liquid natural gas through Prince Rupert, which is huge not only for British Columbia as long-term source of income, but globally for fighting climate change and getting liquid natural gas around the world. And also not popular with the voters.
I mean, I think that's true. Like you could, but you know, say you see those, you know, say you're a politician and you're Horgan and you see those as politically untouchable. Couldn't you think of at least 1 or 2 other problems that would jive with Canadians? Like it just shows a complete lack of fucking vision. Like the only thing
the only one they really like big picture thing that works with BC voters is climate change.
Yeah,
that I can think of.
Well, there's 2 things that they kind of consistently seem to talk about is like rent, like
true, yeah,
rent and child care, with daycare. That seems to be like their quote unquote promises, and basically all that, you know, both like Liberals and NDP. It's essentially like, we're going to spend a shitload of money so you don't have to. So we're going to tax you and then give that money back to you in the form of subsidized daycare. We're going to bribe you with your own money for subsidized daycare and rent free. And it's like, okay, well, that is a very forward-thinking, genius fucking plan that won't skew the fucking supply and demand and fuck up the markets for those things. It's like, I don't know. It's just like, it's so fucking short-sighted and brain dead, and it's like, that's the only thing they kind of like have like that fits into this like family, I guess, like, working for your family type bullshit that every party harps on about, and it's like, man, I don't know. This ain't it for me.
Yeah,
like,
I'd agree with that for sure.
And that also feels like just like the provincial is this, like, it's the same at the federal level too. Like, it's just,
yeah, you
no
see that
vision.
in the cons and the Liberals and the NDP.
But from a British Columbia perspective, I find it like absurd, equal parts absurd and hilarious that there's now a proposed railway from Alaska to Alberta that would cost $17 billion on the Canadian side and $5 billion on the American side, that's been approved in America, that would move resources from Alberta to the ocean, because it's just it's just not viable to build railways or any infrastructure through British Columbia.
That's insane. Like, how many billions of dollars are now gone because of that for BC? Like, you're just...
Well, it's like there's people willing to put in tens of billions of dollars on infrastructure for railways and such if they can.
Well, that to me, it just shows like the state of BC, where it's like you want to play these pandering games to small groups, like the native groups, like we talked about in the last podcast. You've absolutely crippled your economy comparatively to what it could be. And this is one of the things that I noticed with the NDP in particular. One of the things I liked about the Liberals is they were talking about, we want actual development of our resources here. NDP doesn't really talk too much about that. And I think, well, as much as it's not good to have a huge chunk of your economy just devoted to real estate. And you don't, like, a huge part of what BC can do is natural resources. And if you're not, like, you obviously have to deal with them appropriately, so you're not just strip mining it, literally everything.
Hey,
but
we also had tourism, and luckily there's nothing.
Yeah, luckily nothing happened to that.
There's no like events or anything that can disrupt the tourism industry. That's just a steady Freddy forever. Oh man,
a couple of things.
Like Japan reported like a 99.9% decrease in tourism. It's like, man, why even bother like calculating that percentage?
Well, it is funny that like for tourism, like there's still like a percentage of people that are traveling the world, including like Canada, like without a care in the fucking world.
Yeah, they're just like, fuck it.
Oh man, living the dream, honestly.
Yeah, well, you don't have you don't have lions, so maybe it's actually the big brain move.
Well, and it's so cheap because these flights just don't have people on them. If you're totally like unscheduled and everything and just looking for deals, you're gonna find deals everywhere.
Oh yeah, honestly, if you were pretty much okay with going to lockdown nations, it's not a bad time to go. Oh yeah,
Canada, you probably can't get in right now.
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't advise traveling, but if you're a bit of a risk taker, it's probably one of the best times you could go. Something that, like, some of the stuff that I found really, like, the stuff that I really didn't like is there's the equality, inclusion, and human rights issues. It's like closing the gender pay gap and a bunch of like systemic racism stuff, and it's like, reinvestigating the police to make sure that they're not racist, and like a bunch of like silly wokeism stuff that I think, what a enormous waste of everybody's time, and just like what an extra irritant into the system, because it really is not like you're gonna spend like how many tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars on this stuff. You're gonna get nowhere, and you're actually, I think, gonna create a lot of social friction. One of the funniest things that they're going to start doing is collecting a bunch of statistics based on race and gender and all this. And it's like, well, you think that that's going to work well for you, but I don't think you're going to like what you get. Like, it's not going to... I think you're gonna run into a bunch of problems with that. And I think this type of stuff, both the Liberals are doing it, the Greens even worse, and then the NDP just as bad. Like pushing this type of stuff, like they want like mandatory trainings for government workers about, you know, cultural humility. So pretty much telling you, hey, you know, you need to recognize that your culture's shitty or something and is oppressive to others. It's kind of strange, but that was one of the things that I noticed that all three of them did to pretty heavy degrees. And I think there's quite a bit of friction being pumped into the system. What's that?
I pray they start collecting statistics like that.
Yeah, they all want race-based.
Taking charge, like, and collecting.
Those end up like Sweden, and they'll have to ban collecting statistics based on race.
Oh yeah,
they already did that, and they're bringing it back, and that's like.
Oh yeah, they're doing that federally, aren't they? I thought.
Yeah, federally and provincially, it looks like it now.
Statistics like crime. They didn't collect race statistics like at a federal level, and now they're going to start doing it again. And it's like, man, I can't wait until like they just like
have to ban it all.
Black people as white people.
Black people as what?
White people. It's like, man, crimes white people are doing. It's like if you have like. Yeah,
well, like that type of data is already kind of out there to a certain degree. Like they have that on, like we talked about that in the last podcast. Like, you know, natives make up 5% of the population. It's like 30% of murderers and murder victims.
I think they have. They obviously collect conviction and like like prisoner population and stuff like that, because it's like an outcome that's already like measurable and they can't like not, right?
Yeah,
it's just like the actual crime statistics. They don't collect, as far as I know, at a federal level, like in an actual like centralized database. When crime
stats Canada's going to do it now.
Suspect description by race. They don't actually like aggregate all that into stats. They don't do that because they're not allowed to. Now they're going to start doing that, and it's just going to be like they're going to have to do like some super gymnastics to avoid the inevitable fucking liberal nightmare outcomes, like the woke nightmare outcomes of like the stats speaking for themselves, or they're just going to have to like scrap the program after a year. Yeah. Like I just
imagine it won't ever be allowed to be publicly available.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know how the legal ramifications, because some of that stuff I'm sure is forced to be made public by Freedom of Information.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you because it'll be government collected information.
That'll be how it happens. So they won't release it. It'll get Freedom of Information requested, and it'll come out, and they'll have to shut the whole program down.
Yeah, that's exactly what'll happen.
There'll be some cabinet meeting that Trudeau was or wasn't at. Can't quite tell. The Prime Minister's office will be involved, but we don't know the Prime Minister for sure. And there'll be allegations.
We don't know if he was present.
And at least one of his cabinet ministers will step down.
Yeah, one of the things about the NDP said that I really think is not great is it's like a new law to take on racism. So they want a new anti-racism act. So they want like a full anti-racism set of laws, which to me sounds...
Man, I'm just going to start saying that I'm like visible minority. And what are you going to tell me? Like, what are you going to say? Oh, you have to provide like your ancestry? No, that's racist, bro. I don't know my ancestry. That was lost in the...
Man, look at that nose. It's visible to everyone you're a minority.
Yeah, exactly. It was the shipping logs were lost. I don't know my ancestry, and further, you can't judge like the percentage of minority that I am based on my appearance. That's racist. You know, I might look, Caucasian to you, but I do have minority ancestry. Thank you very much. Like, what are they going to say? Like, oh, you don't. Like, okay, well, that's very judgmental. That's very anti-inclusive of you. Like, it's just so ridiculous. Like, I actually think lots of people will start doing that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can... I think it's already started. Like, I really do think that... Like, I have seen stuff like that already cropping up here or there.
Like, if you're like, for the example, like say you're 1/8 Asian and you're 7/8 white, and you look totally white. Well, just say you're a visible minority, and like, what are they going to say? And then like extrapolate from that. If you're 8/8 white and you know someone who's 7/8 white and is claimed to be a visible minority, maybe it might make sense for you to claim that too. And what are they going to do about it? Like, fuck them. Like, I don't know. Like, that stuff is just, I agree. Like,
well, it's exactly how it's going to play out, because there's so many incentives to do it and no reason not to.
Yeah, and there's no coherent way to stop survey.
That. Like, the percentage of white people goes from, like, 2020 is like, what, I don't know what Canada's at these days, 70% or whatever, and like 2024 it's like 12%. It's like, man, that is crazy.
Yeah.
The gay population explodes. People, LGBTQ.
Oh yeah. Oh, I guarantee you. Well, like, here's the funniest thing. It's like
78% of the population identifies.
Well, this is exactly it.
It's real numbers.
One of the things that I noticed with a lot of there's a lot of really high-powered business people coming out and saying, like, we are all about combating systemic prejudice and bigotry. And there are, obviously, quote-unquote, cisgendered white males that are doing this. And
that's what you would say.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, those are not going to be cisgendered for very long. Like, they're going to have to start making claims that they don't even know what they're talking about. But because eventually, if you want to play that game, it's like that woke type of ideology is going to come for you. And then as a cis white man, you really have no leg to stand on if you bought into this and you push this into your company. So the only thing that you have to do is you just identify. It's like, no, identify as I'm a transgendered.
Exactly. I was going to say it'll still be 50% men and 50% women, but it'll be like all women will identify as men and all men will identify as women. It'll just flip 50-50 still, but everyone will be trans. Percentage of trans will be 100%, 50-50 men and women.
Exactly. Well, and then it also you'll start getting like transracial and all sorts of crap. Like that's. Like, it's going to be a little bit harder sell, but that's what'll happen, right? It's like all it takes is a few people to do that at high levels, and then the whole thing flips.
I'm definitely disabled. You can tell.
Yeah.
Man, but like, don't even get started on trans species. Like, that's actually going to happen, and I hate it. I hate the timeline we live in.
I'm a female disabled dog.
But here's the thing, it's like, well, now then it really means that you have to push for equal rights with human beings for like all animals, because that means you wouldn't be able to be put down in a pound. So you better get on the animal rights activism right now.
Get webcam, so I'm just gonna get a 2D dog avatar.
For the year 2030.
Yeah, you're gonna go to York as a 2D dog.
Well, we're all online, so it's fine.
Trans-dimensional. I identify as two-dimensional.
Oh man, Alex Jones was already ahead of the curve again.
I'm not even 3-dimensional. That's fucking bullshit. I don't want to be 3-dimensional.
Oh man, that is actually the future. I'm not even real. I'm virtual.
Yeah, you're not even a person. Like you're just a collection of bits.
You can only see me when I face you from the front. From the side, I'm just a line.
Yeah. You're in Flat World or Flatland.
Anyway, I think that is like the direct next couple of years result of NDP and the Liberal policy. I'm certain that's the outcome.
Like a lot of the.
We predicted the future almost down to a T, without exaggeration.
Trans species, trans-dimensional.
Power you can only achieve by being trans. There's a proper word for it, but time traveler.
Oh, true. You're also
don't identify as part of the current continuum of time space.
Yeah, I identify as being from the 1930s.
Oh no, but that means you're a racist. Because everybody in the past was racist.
Like.
But I guess if it's all transracial,
he identifies as being not racist from the 1930s. Checkmate.
Yeah, there you go.
I think maybe we can roll up there unless we have we can find our way back to the BC election somehow.
I think it's done.
I don't think that's recoverable.
Yeah, that's true. That was the tailspin.
Yeah, I think we killed it. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Peace.